Hey everybody, this is Joe. We're talking about Marvel Multiverse, and we are going to talk about new powers inside of the X-Men expansion book. Here we go. So the X-Men expansion has launched and it has new powers and new power sets, and I want to spend a couple videos exploring these in some detail to look at things I'm excited about in the game and definitely excited about doing character builds with. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Our first changes are to the Elemental Control power set. There are not new powers in Elemental Control. Instead, there are new elements to be associated with. Remember, when you go into the Elemental Control power set, you choose a particular element you are associated with, and you get a special effect from it whenever you have a fantastic success with given powers. What we get are two new elements. We get the chemical element, which causes the corroding condition, and the toxin element, which causes the poisoned condition. And this means we need to jump into the three new conditions that are in this expansion. The corroding condition is first. You've been doused with chemicals in some way, and you lose 5 points of health at the end of each of your turns. There is no additional roll for this whatsoever. It is just 5 points. And the only way to remove the corroding condition is either to die or to be doused with, and I'm going to quote here, a copious amount of water to remove the chemical. And that copious amount of water is actually a great phrase. It means that we probably don't have that amount of water on hand. I really don't like the ablaze condition because it's easy to put out the fire with an action, but the corroding condition is very difficult to remove. As a result, this is a fascinating thing to impose onto an enemy, or if you're a narrator, to have a villain impose onto a hero, because they have to find a way to end the condition before it outright kills them. The next condition is not associated with the Elemental Control power set. It is the infected condition. I think this is a playground for a narrator and is super exciting. Sadly, there isn't really a way for a player to engage with the infected condition offensively as a character because there is a lot of narrator interpretation here. But I think this is going to be so much fun for a lot of campaigns. Here's the way it works. You have to decide if whatever you're creating is infectious through being airborne and being breathed, or through touch. I think the more exciting answer is being breathed, being an airborne infection. To be infected by something that is airborne, you must pass within 3 spaces of it and breathe it in. So you can't be holding your breath and be infected, obviously. If it is imposed through touch, then it must happen through a touch that deals at least 1 point of damage, meaning that the character would know the actual attack that caused the infected condition, which is what makes it, I think, a little bit less interesting, though it does mean you can impose this with villains pretty easily, and I think that has some value. Once you are exposed, you have to make a resilience check. Now, the resilience check that's recommended is a target number of 12, but with more virulent or more deadly infections, that can go up as appropriate. This is there so that this concept can scale with the characters, because a target number 12 resilience check is going to be a reasonable check at low levels of play, but is meaningless at higher levels of play. Once we're able to scale this, which is specifically discussed, it's a much more interesting power. Here's where the infection condition gets really interesting. There are no specific rules for what it does. None. It is up to the narrator to homebrew an infectious condition. Maybe it gets worse with time and adds conditions as it goes. Maybe it is simply a cumulative effect, such as adding trouble on checks, and that gets worse until you die. Maybe it just causes health or focus damage. There is so much that you can do with an infected condition, and it is left entirely open to the narrator's interpretation. The other thing that's exciting about the infected condition is it specifically stipulates that some infected conditions have incubation periods, and that once a character is effectively infected, they become an infection source for other characters. Here's the way I envision using this in my game. have an infectious thing of some kind. One or more of the characters passes by it, breathes it in, and I call for a resilience check, but I do not say what it is for. And this is an infection that will have a 24 to 48 hour incubation period. After that roll, these characters are now infection points, and I am going to have other characters that come near them roll for their own infection. After 24 to 48 hours, the conditions start to mount up and they have a massive problem on their hands. I think this could be a fascinating thing inside of the game to see what they're going to do about it. I would love to hear the types of infections and conditions and effects that you would homebrew in your game, and I think other people would love to see it as well in the comments below. Next is the poisoned condition. You poison somebody and they make a resilience check with a target number of 18. Which means it doesn't scale as the game goes on, but 18 is a nice kind of average. The check is to see if they take 1 point of damage. That's it, 1 point of damage. But it happens every single turn. Here's the problem. The poison condition is pretty easy to remove. First of all, if they have a fantastic success, then the poison is simply removed from their system. Now, the reality is a fantastic success happens 17% of the time. So you're going to actually get the poison out of your system before it does any significant damage. Next, there are lots of ways of removing poison. It's specifically listed that many poisons have antidotes. Sometimes you're able to go to the hospital and they are able to cure you. You're able to, it specifically talks about swallowing activated charcoal to remove poisons. And if you have the healing factor power, you are simply immune to the poisoned condition effectively. And if you survive for 24 hours, it goes away on its own. This means that the poison condition is actually only interesting at lower levels of play, before characters take healing factor, before a resilience check of 18 is something that's relatively easy to pass, and where 1 point of damage every round until they have a fantastic success is actually meaningful. I don't love this condition simply because it's so easy to remove. But with all that said, the corroding condition is fascinating inside of Elemental Control, and I think that there's a playground for using infection in your game. So some pretty good bumps here, but I think the poison condition is just not that exciting. Next, we have a brand new power set, and it is healing. Back when this game was still in pre-testing, right, in the playtesting phase, I was talking even then about how much I wish that there was a healing power in the game. I talked about it then, I talked about it when the core rulebook came out, that I just wanted healing, and now it's finally here. Is it everything it's cracked up to be? Let's see. This power set comes essentially in two halves. One is healing health, the other is healing focus. Let's start with healing health first, and we start with a power called Let's Go. Let's Go has a prerequisite of being rank 2, so you really can't get into this power set at the earliest stage of play. This is an action or a reaction. The reaction is triggered only when a target is knocked unconscious. It is a concentration power, and you must touch your target, and it costs 5 points of focus. This power removes all of the effects of having a target's health go below 0. So remember, going below 0 means you are knocked unconscious, and everything the unconscious condition imposes, okay? But it does not actually heal. This is an important thing about the Let's Go power. The character that you heal still is at negative hit points. So if they were at negative 10 or negative 20, they go unconscious. You use Let's Go and they're able to get up. They are no longer unconscious, but they are still at negative 10 or negative 20 health, whatever it was. They can still be hit, they can still go unconscious again, and they can still be killed. Additionally, they cannot use actions or reactions, they can only use movement, presumably to get away from the fight. I have a problem with that point. I don't have a problem with a character that is still at negative hit points not being able to make attacks. but I would like for them to be able to make recovery checks. Technically speaking, a recovery check is an action on your turn to use, meaning a character that's brought up with Let's Go does not have the ability to make a recovery check to recover health. And I think that that would be the play we'd want to do. But this power does not allow for it. They have to run away and they have to use the natural amount of healing that takes place over time to get back above zero, taking them out of the game effectively for some number of hours. Secondly, of course, it is a concentration power, meaning that if someone knocks your concentration off of you, the other character goes back down. And that can be a pretty devastating moment because you would lose concentration if you are knocked unconscious as well. But the more likely way that you're going to lose concentration is when you are knocked prone, which does end concentration on powers. Here's the problem. This advertises a break glass in case of emergency thing to do. And since there's no other great way of healing somebody who is downed, I guess it's fine. But it really is just there to get somebody up so that you can run. And for whatever that's worth, it's good. But I don't think it's great because it doesn't actually heal. Next we have Healing Hands. This requires the Let's Go power in a rank of 3. It is an action to use and costs 10 points of focus or more. With Healing Hands, and this is what I was always looking for in a healing power, you touch somebody and for every point of focus you spend, minimum of 10, you heal their health. Please remember, there is a limit on the amount of focus you can spend on a given action in a given turn, which is 5 points of focus per each rank. And that means that there is a limit to the amount of healing, which I think is fine. It's easy to get lots of focus in this game, and being able to spam incredible amounts of healing is probably something we should restrict. This is really what we were looking for to get somebody back into the fight. And for me, I don't understand why this is a rank 3 power. I think everything should be shifted down, personally, where Let's Go is a rank 1 power because it will get people up, but it doesn't heal them. And Healing Hands being rank 2, I think would make more sense. There's a couple powers in this power set that if I were playing a healing character in the game, I would use Surprising Power to nab a little bit early. But at any rate, this is really useful. It's going to get people back on their feet. It's going to top people off and allow them to stay on the front lines. And we've been looking for healing powers in this game. Next, we have Cure All. This requires the Healing Hands power in a rank of 4. It is an action to use and costs 15 points of focus. Cure All requires an ego check with a target number of 12. So if you have the discipline powers, this is trivially easy throughout most of the game. And upon a success, you can remove any condition. The wording of the power indicates that it is any one single condition, but it can be any temporary condition in the game. Blinded, ablaze, this can be unconscious or demoralized. Anything that has a natural end to it, you can effectively just eliminate with 15 points of focus and no concentration. I say temporary because this will not bring people back from the dead. Upon a success, if you are bringing back people from being demoralized or unconscious, they have 1 point of focus or 1 point of health. That's critical because as soon as they are able to be conscious and make action checks, they can do recovery checks. And that was what was missing with the Let's Go power as we discussed. This is pretty useful, but most conditions are not worth 15 points of focus to end. So this is kind of useful, right? There are some conditions that we absolutely need to end. Demoralized, unconscious, and I would argue corroding being one that I would definitely want to end because they're difficult to end in other ways. But there are some conditions where it's just not worth 15 points of focus to end. The obvious examples are poisoned, which we've already talked about being something that ends on its own pretty easily, and something like maybe ablaze. When you're ablaze, you can spend an action to put out the fire that's on you relatively easily. There's a number of ways of being able to do so. It specifically lists in the ablaze condition using your action to basically stop, drop, and roll on the ground. So sometimes yes, sometimes no. However, fantastic successes are really worth talking about. On a fantastic success, this is also treated as a recovery check for health and focus. Not or, and. Meaning, if you get a fantastic success, the character gets to roll a recovery check for their health and their focus, making this a great pickup to pair with combat trickery. In fact, you almost want to be able to impose perhaps the blinded or deafened condition onto one of your allies, and then immediately afterwards get a fantastic success on Cure All and allow them to recover health and focus. It's a kind of a tricky play, but rules as written, it could work. Anyway, there is some really good uses for Cure All and some uses that I think are a waste, but overall, this is a great addition to a healing and support-based character. Next, we have Resurrect. Resurrect does exactly what it says on the tin. It's going to bring someone back to life. This requires you to have the Healing Hands power and a rank of 5. It is an action to use and costs 10 or more focus, which can make it the most focus costly power in the entire game. You make an ego check to bring someone back from the dead, and the check is actually interesting. It is 10 plus 1 for every hour that they have been dead, right? So specifically, if a character has been dead for 4 hours, the target number of your ego check is 14. This is not a terribly difficult check. Most of the time when we bring someone back from the dead in a TTRPG, they died literally minutes ago in a fight. And so your target number will be very low for that situation. But you can use it for NPCs as well, and that might be really interesting in the course of the game. If you get a fantastic success on the check, they are restored to full health, otherwise they're restored to 1 hit point, making this another pickup that's really good for a combat trickery pairing. There are some rules interactions that are a little strange here. Are you able to easily add edges to the check, right? This seems like a really good pickup for a signature attack trait where you would always get an edge when resurrecting people. That seems like it would be pretty interesting. The second rules interaction, which I think is a little bit strange, is there's nothing listed in the power about what happens if you fail. So if you fail the check, are you able to just spend 20 focus and try again? That seems like it'd be too cheesy for me. I wish that there was language here that said you get to try once, and upon a failure, you are unable to ever bring this person back from the dead. That would actually add stakes to the power, especially if we were able to add combat trickery and edges to it, right? It seems like it would be trivially easy to bring someone back from the dead in most circumstances, and that you would just be able to try again, pretty much guaranteeing that this never fails. And the last thing here is actually really interesting. Upon a success of any kind, your focus is reduced to 1 because of how arduous it is to bring someone back from the dead. And if you fail the check, you only spend the 20 points of focus. So you can't just go around resurrecting additional people unless you do recovery checks for your focus, which you absolutely could do, but you would burn through focus points very quickly trying to bring multiple people back from the dead. Resurrection is really powerful, generally speaking, but this power I think is not going to get a ton of use. And the reason why is character death is much more likely at lower levels of play, but this requires a rank of 5 to nab. Now, there are 2 prerequisites, and those prerequisites take you through rank 3, and theoretically you could grab a surprising power and nab this a little bit early to get it into lower gameplay, which I think is where it actually shines. So it's good as a resurrection power. Is it great? I'm not really that sure. Also, it's worth noting you can't really pick this up any earlier, even with surprising power, than a rank of 4, because you can only spend 5 points of focus for an individual power per each rank you've obtained. So even if you cheesed things and picked it up at rank 3, you literally couldn't use it yet, rules as written. And as a result, resurrection comes into play right at the moment it's needed less and less and less. Let's take a look at the powers that recover focus, and we're going to start with Never Surrender, which of course all I can think about is Galaxy Quest when I hear that. You have to be a rank of 2. This is a concentration power. You have to touch somebody within your reach, and it costs 5 points of focus. This is the other half of the Let's Go power. You eliminate all of the negative consequences of being demoralized, but critically, the target is still in the negative focus territory, meaning if your concentration ends, they become demoralized again. They are still unable to spend any focus, and they can still lose focus, and they can still be shattered. But importantly, this character is now able to act normally, but they cannot spend focus, meaning they can still attack on their turn, and critically, they can still do a recovery check for focus, meaning that they could get themselves back into true fighting condition. Meaning that while being demoralized is less common than going unconscious, the Never Surrender power is more effective at helping somebody who is demoralized. Next is Soothing Touch. This requires the Never Surrender power, a rank of 3, and costs 10 or more points of focus, and you must touch a target within your reach. You are able to touch a target and recover focus. This is essentially just spending your focus, and they recover their focus on a one-to-one basis. So I don't know how useful this is. The problem is you are giving up your action and 10 points of focus in order to heal their focus back up. Okay, that's fine, but they're able to do recovery checks to regain focus, which would actually give them more focus on average than you are able to do by spending focus on a one-to-one basis. Remember, when you roll a recovery check, you take the die roll and multiply it by your rank, and that gives you the focus that you recover. So as long as you beat a 10, which is going to happen almost always, you're actually in a really good position to recover a lot of focus. The trouble with doing a recovery check when you're demoralized is when you are demoralized, you have trouble on all action checks. So you would do the recovery check with trouble. If I just got somebody with the Never Surrender power, which means that they do not any longer have trouble on action checks, they could spend an action on their turn to do a recovery check and they'd recover more focus, and I spent less focus to actually help them in that way. So how helpful is Soothing Touch? I just don't know that it's great, but it's pretty good. And next we have Restore. This requires a rank of 5 and the Soothing Touch power. It is a touch power, so you have to touch somebody within your reach, and it costs 20 points of focus. This power restores somebody from being shattered. You make an ego check against a target number of 20, which is not that hard at rank 5. On a success, the person is no longer shattered and they are brought back to 1 point of focus. On a fantastic success, they are no longer shattered and they are restored to full focus. If you succeed in this check, you are reduced to 1 focus, and even if you fail, you still spend the 20 points of focus. All of the strange rules interactions that have to do with resurrection apply to Restore, so I'm not going to go back over them. How good is this? It's not that great. The reality is I've played multiple full campaigns of this game, and I have never seen a character get shattered. And I've said this before, there are not enough ways to attack focus in this game. There need to be more, and we need to have a bigger variety. I keep having to homebrew things that attack focus. And so characters being able to make recovery checks for recovering focus, characters just deciding not to spend as much, and having fewer abilities to attack focus in the game, meaning I just don't take characters down into negative focus territory. I've taken characters down to negative focus a few times, but all the way to negative territory where they'd be shattered, I have not yet seen it. And since I haven't seen that, I know that at least it's rare. If it's rare, then we would not use this almost ever. And of course, it doesn't come online till rank 5 when characters have so much focus that getting to the shattered condition is very difficult. It's difficult to get to shattered. Let's talk about that. Remember that the shattered condition happens when you get a negative focus value that is the absolute value of your max focus. So if you have a max focus of 100, then you'd be shattered at negative 100 focus. Once you hit 0 focus, you can no longer willingly spend focus, which means I have to have something in the game that reduces a character's focus from 0 down to negative 100 in this case, or whatever, okay? And what in the world could that be? Well, there are a couple powers that attack focus, sure, but if I'm playing a villain, is he really going to spend his time trying to reduce the focus of somebody who's already become ineffective in the battle? I find that a little bit strange. Or it could have some kind of environmental condition, which I have homebrewed, which reduces focus. And that's going to take multiple turns in order to actually shatter somebody. All the while, they are able to recover focus with action checks on their turn. So shattering somebody is actually pretty difficult to do. And if it ever happens, there's no other way in the game to restore a shattered character. There's no other way. This is it. This is the one. But did we really need it? And does it need to be this difficult? I don't think so. I wish that Restore and Resurrection had been one power, right? Where you could choose to either bring someone back from the dead or somebody back from being shattered, and you just get to choose. And then I wouldn't feel like I have to take a whole other power for this incredibly rare scenario. I don't think Restore is going to get a lot of gameplay. All right, so those are the power sets we're going to look at in today's video, and we will look at the rest of the power sets in subsequent videos. YouTube's made out of buttons. I hope you press some of them, and I'll see you next time.